And action. Hello, I'm Eric Brook, and welcome back to Erk Pod. It's been a little bit of time since our last episode, and to sort of explain where I've been on holidays for the last month from my place of employment, and that's an interesting story in itself. So, before we talk about what's going on in the episode, let's talk to you about where I've been for the last month or so, and that's been on holidays. Now, it is coming up to mid-July as I'm recording this, and it's actually my 2024 holidays that I'm on, not my 2025 holidays. They're actually coming up and hasn't started yet. So I've been employed in the transport industry on the trains for last year was my 30 years, and this year marked up 20 years as a driver. So what I wanted to do, I wanted to go out and explore the world and try something a little bit different to see if I'd like it, with the intention of coming back. Now I know that this may be unheard of in some industries, but one of the conditions we have long service leave, which is another story all of its own, and I know in some areas that's not a common thing. Where after 10 years of service, in addition to your annual leave, they give you 2 months off every 10 years. Effectively, that's the way it basically works out. So, as the name suggests, it's a reward for long service, and I know that that's not a thing in some areas, and in some countries, I know that's not a thing. And I've certainly taken advantage of that over the years. Another thing that we've got options for now is called flexible working arrangements or flexible working agreements. So what you can do, you can make an application to the employer and you can say, well, I have special needs. I need some adjustments to the roster. Quite happy to keep on doing the job. And I actually did that for a couple of years, quite a few years ago now, when my mum was sick, and I said to my employer that, this is the situation at home. I need afternoon shifts because my mum was at worst in the morning, so I could get her settled and then come to work. And I wanted to be rostered Monday to Thursday. We could set aside Friday for her medical appointments if need be. And because anyone who's had any experience with the medical systems knows that it's hard enough sometimes to get a medical appointment that you have to sometimes book months in advance. And as a shift worker, it's even harder because you don't necessarily know what shift you're going to be on, 2 months down the track. And then the weekend would be my normal 2 days off a fortnight. No, my 4 days off a fortnight. So every weekend I'd be off. So that's where I could do my thing, and my thing in my happy place. Obviously, maybe not obvious to you, is in later years hockey, ice hockey. Cool. So I did that for a couple of years. We have the situation now where we have some people at work where they can afford to. There may be a couple of people working. One of the people in the relationship might be on a lot higher money, so they can afford to do this. We have what's called job sharing. So what you have to do, you have to line up with someone else who wants to job share, and so you work it out between you, and sometimes the period's 2 weeks, but it's most commonly a month. So out of the two people, one person works for the month while the other person's off, and then it changes. For the next month, so they switch around, so there's the equivalent of one person, but there's two people sharing the job. And that has worked out well for some people as well. Gives them a bit extra time away from the workplace, that sort of thing. But that, you have to be really able to afford that, because when you're not working for that month, you're not getting paid. And so that could be difficult. And that's where having a significant other, partner, wife, husband, whatever you want to call them, if they're earning good money, and you can support yourselves during the month that the person's not working, well, that's one thing that's happening more and more often. What I wanted to go for last year is a variation of flexible working. It's called a career break. And it's one where you can, and I know not every company has this, where you can say to the employer, I want to take 12 months off, usually 12 months to start with. I want to take 12 months off, don't get paid, go work somewhere else, basically see what that's like, and then you can extend it up to a maximum of 5 years, and then after that, well, you basically resign. But in the meantime, while you're on your career break, they keep your position open for you. You have to give them notice when you want to come back, etc. But what I wanted to do was to take 12 months off, have a bit more control over my rosters, and what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it, and then come back refreshed after 12 months. But that was, in the end, that was denied because we don't have enough staff. We've got too many people off doing other things on secondments, etc. I have tried to get into secondments where you basically work in another position somewhere else that you qualified in or that you could do. I've tried that, but that's also because of short staff, new trades, etc. That didn't happen. So I didn't take my annual leave last year. I was going to take my annual leave, then start the career break. The career break didn't happen, so the annual leave didn't happen. And so that's why I'm basically on holidays now. So a few weeks ago, I said to the forward rostering officer and my manager, I still haven't had my 2024 leave yet. So I worked all of last year, with the exception of a couple of weeks off that I took on long service leave. So what ended up happening was I said I'm supposed to go on this year's holidays in August. Can I take the 2024 leave on either side, on either the before or after the 2025 leave? So they said, right, yeah, you could do that. You can take your 2024 leave in late June. That'll go into August when you go into your 2025 leave, and then come back mid-September. So effectively, I've got the second half of, or the end of June through to mid-September off, because, and this is another thing I know that a lot of people don't get, as any worker in my industry for my organisation gets 4 weeks off a year. And I know in some places like America and parts of Asia, that would be a luxury. You'd be lucky to get 1 or 2 weeks. But because I'm a shift worker, I get an additional week, so that makes it 5 weeks that I get off anyway. So the two periods combined is 10 weeks. So I've been on holidays. I've been doing a lot around the house. I've been also recovering from, and I know I didn't go and get it checked out, so I don't have a title for what it actually is. But I had a pretty bad cough there for a while, and it's still sort of lingering. And I know my voice isn't sounding 100% great at the moment. I might just adjust that camera. There we go. And I know it's sort of been lingering in my voice. Doesn't sound the greatest at the moment. My main focus with my voice has been doing my hockey on the weekends because that is what I need to do. So here we are, this episode of Erk Pod. I hope you have enjoyed the previous episodes. I'm trying as much as possible to stay away from the quote unquote the news. And I know that in the previous audio version of Erk Pod many years ago, my focus was the news, what's going on, funny stories, and all that sort of stuff. But this time around, and I was on a tighter schedule. Like, there was no way, even when I went overseas, there was content coming out. But I'm like, you know what? Today I'm going to record a couple of episodes and get them up there. So this is what we're doing. Now, before we talk about that, let's talk about the shirt of the episode. NTL Sticker Collective, which is me. You can get your t-shirts of choice, and I'm uploading more designs, etc., based on the Succulent Chinese Meal guy, or the Democracy Manifest guy, and I must get round to recording that episode to explain more about it for anyone who doesn't know. But here's the shirt of the episode, which is actually not the shirt that I'm wearing. I designed all of these t-shirts myself. Newcastle Sticker Collective. Various designs, various themes, and I'm also uploading more designs and I'm uploading more merchandise. So there's a small range of hoodies, sweatshirts, and also long sleeve shirts, and they're increasing. And you can get 10% off at checkout. Use discount code ERKPOD10 for 10% off your purchase. ntlstickercollective.com.au/democracy manifest. There is actually a video too on that page. But that is the NTL Sticker Collective shirt of the episode. At checkout, use ERKPOD10 for 10% off your purchase. ntlstickercollective.com.au/democracy manifest. And I did really like designing this particular t-shirt. Sort of gives you a bit of an idea about the man himself and the history of this particular event. But that is the t-shirt of the episode. Now, one thing when I was doing Erk Pod originally, I sort of stayed away from, and even on social media sometimes I stay away from, this is what I do for a job, blah, 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 blah. But in this current age of me being into video, because I wasn't into video, because obviously our camera equipment wasn't the best, when you consider that I did the initial version of Erk Pod between 2007 and 2014. So our cameras weren't great. Especially by today's standards. But now that our cameras are a lot better, well, it's different. One thing I often get asked is about the trains I drive and what do they look like and that sort of thing. And with video, it is so much easier to describe. So what we're going to do now, we're going to have a look at one of my other channels, A Mountain of Work. And this is videos that I shot over a series of mornings while I had nothing to do. And it will show you the type of trains that I drive, but it'll also tell you the history of how I got here. And I just realised that I've got the wrong title above my head. Because I'm working on so many different screens at the moment. So we're not looking back at the Pasha Polka visiting Newcastle. Indeed, this is all stations to Newcastle. So let's go and have a look. So this episode is called Good Morning Newcastle Interchange, and I'll talk a little bit about the trains first, and then I'll tell you about how I got here, etc.
IXL, proudly celebrating 165 years, creating high-quality bathroom heating, lighting and ventilation products, dedicated to bringing you the best in quality and reliability.
I'm not signed into YouTube on this browser. Oops. Oh, that's going to be... That's interesting. Alright, I'm signed in as me. Might have to adjust the volume a bit. That's one of the races I have YouTube Premium. I got how many seconds in, and then there was an ad. So here we are. The train that's leaving on the right hand side is called a Mariang train, and that's the newest type of train that we have on the network. Up to 10 cars. It's an electric train. All the mod cons introduced into service in late 2024. And so this is Newcastle Interchange Station. It is 2.5 to 3 hours north of Sydney, and is where I live now. 2.5 hours if you're on an express train, or 3 hours if it's more of an all stops train. But we will talk about some of the trains. So there's the Mariang train in the front of screen. I drive diesel trains and electric trains out of Newcastle, and it's been an absolute lot of fun. This is actually the first day that the Mariang train entered service. Now, Mariang is an Aboriginal word, an Indigenous word meaning emu, which is also interesting because these trains are also known as electric multiple units. The train that's in the foreground, the yellow and blue one, that's called an Oscar train out of suburban carriages, and that's also an electric train. And until the Mariang, this was the newest type of train that I drove. They were introduced around from about 2007. But I won't, now that the Mariang is fully in service on my line, I won't be driving those. I won't be driving the Oscar train. So the Mariang train can be of various lengths: 4, 6, 8 or 10 carriages. And one thing that this train has that other trains don't have, what they do have, I should say. What they do have that other trains don't is that if there's a short platform, and there's many short platforms, is that the doors won't open if there's no platform there. Approaching us now is a 2-car diesel Hunter train that was also introduced in 2007. So they run between Newcastle and the Hunter Valley. I love driving those trains. Maximum speed of those trains is 145 kilometres an hour. Maximum service speed of these trains, the Mariang trains and also the Oscar trains, is 130. Not always can we do those speeds, but there are areas that we can do those speeds. Mariang train is a nice train to drive. So it's just in the middle. It's just at what it is doing at the moment. It's just to go out, about to go up to the nearby storage yard, and it will soon come back to form the first ever passenger service of this train.
Then all stations to Wyong, then all stations to Gosford, then Point Clare, Tascott, Coolewong, Woiwoi, Wondermine, Hawkesbury River, Cowan, Barara, Hornsby, Epping, Strathfield and Central.
So you might be wondering why there's no voiceover, apart from obviously what I'm doing now on this video on About to Work. Now there's a few things. I don't want my voice associated in a way with Amount of Work. I just want the trains. It's not about me as a personality, Amount of Work. It's about the trains and the other transport. And I have seen other people with their videos that they produce, and how I'm describing it quite a few months later using a voiceover, they would be doing it live at the station while it's doing it. And I find that you got to concentrate enough as it is with focusing and watching what you're capturing and all that sort of stuff as the Oscar departs for Sydney, without doing voiceovers at the same time. Some people haven't got the concept that you can actually do your voiceovers when you're back home. So here's another Hunter train, 2-car diesel. Recently we had the retirement of the VSET trains, which will come on screen soon. The particular type of train will come on screen soon. And there were people, and that's the way they do it. That's the way they do it, and that's up to them, that's their channel. But they narrate things live as they do it, and it does save them time, etc. And it also captures how they feel about the thing at the time that they're doing it. But for me, concentrating on what I'm capturing at the time is more important. It's not about me as the presenter, it's about the trains, and that's why it's all captured. But because I want to talk about it here with a totally different audience, that's why we're talking now. So the Oscar train is either 4 or 8 carriages. Now these trains will eventually be heading to Sydney and working Sydney suburban services exclusively. These trains are intercity trains, so they run between Sydney and about a 2-3 hour radius of Sydney, the electric intercity services. So there's a whole heap of development going on around Newcastle in a train. There's another Hunter train arrives. So at the moment, and for the majority of this video, I'm on platform 1, with the next platform over being platform 2 and the far platform being platform 3. There is a lot of development going on around the interchange. There's these apartment blocks, and I actually looked into moving into one of these apartments when I moved to Newcastle, but I ended up somewhere else, which was totally fine. There's a crane on the far right, and we'll probably get a better view of it a little bit later. Now the hunters zoom in and out all day, just like this one is. They zoom in and out all day. Now this is a VSET train. Now the earliest one of these trains, these trains were introduced into service 55 years ago. So they were great in their time, really comfortable. A lot of people still love these trains. They have been fully replaced on the Newcastle Central Coastline now. You can still see them at the time of recording in July 2025 on the Blue Mountain side. For years I would catch these trains to work. Beautiful train to drive. 115 kilometres an hour maximum speed these days. Now the most modern version of these trains, because there were several models and several upgrades over the lifetime, late 80s, early 90s, there was the newer type, and that's the newest ones that we have from the early 80s, 1990s. Parts were getting hard to find, and they're not very good in terms of people with disabilities and restricted mobility. And so that's where the Oscars and the Mariungs are a lot better. So this train brought a lot of people up from Sydney to see the first running of the Mariung train as an Oscar departs. I think this one's going to the yard. Yes, it's going to the nearby Hamilton yard. Sometimes trains are parked there for a couple of hours. So this VSET train brought a lot of people up from Sydney to see the first Mariung service. The Hunter train zooming for Hamilton Yard. So this train would normally head back to Sydney as a passenger service, but today it's running on a different timetable because of the introduction of the Mariung train. So lots of people came up from Sydney. We'll see that platforms 2 or 3 over there get very congested, and this is why I decided to stay over here, to stay out of the way. I remember it being very difficult to film this morning looking in this direction because of the sun. It's about 7:30 in the morning. So these images were captured in December 2024. So every train that we see in this video, at one stage or another, I drive. Or drove. Since I've been up here. So the Mariang train is now coming out of Hamilton Yard, and it will come alongside us onto platform 2 to form the very first passenger service of this particular type of train. Now, why this train took so long to enter service is probably an episode in itself, and other channels have done it in more detail than I'm comfortable with. But I think it's good to be able to say, and this is one of the reasons that for many years I took photos and now video. So in years down the track, I could look at this and say, okay, these were the types of trains that I drove, especially when I'm not here. These are the type of trains I drove. I was here to see this first train leave Newcastle, which is the very first passenger service. Now, a lot of these people waiting on platforms 2 or 3, their view of the train was very, very different to the view that I have. Now, there's hardly any people over here. There's a lot of people over there, and it's a much narrower field of view, or point of view. A lot of these people that are on the platform now waiting for this train will actually be on the train to go back to Sydney because, and I understand it, they want to be riding the first passenger service of this train, and I get that. But I wanted to document it, and so while they're on the train going back to Sydney, I'm watching them, and I am recording the first passenger service leaving, which they can record what it was like on the train, but they won't get the views that I have. And yeah, you can see the sun up there. Now this is an 8 carriage train. At the time of filming, they weren't running 10-car passenger services, but they are now. So there's the train. Now inside the train, new passenger information screens, there's USB and PowerPoints to most seats. We've got a Hunter train coming in. And so it's a really good train.
The next train to arrive on platform 1 goes to Muswellbrook. First stop Hamilton, then Waratah, Warrabrook, Beresfield, Thornton, Medford, Victoria Street, Maitland, and then all stations to Muswellbrook.
That Muswellbrook trip, by the way, leaves Newcastle at 8:14 in the morning, goes to Muswellbrook, which is a couple of hours away, turns around, comes back pretty much straight away. It's a good scenic trip of the Hunter Valley that you can do in daylight.
For the 8:14 train to Muswellbrook on platform 1 has changed.
So we're just taking some side-on views of the train. I could see the driver just about to hop into the carriage, into the cabin, and the marker lights, the lights that indicate the direction of the travel of the train, have just changed to white. And so there's lots of people milling around. The first couple of carriages were restricted for media and politicians, etc.
The stops for the 8.
The driver of the first train posing with the train there.
The 8:29 service to Dungog on platform 1 has been cancelled for today.
So there's a VSET coming into platform 3. So the Muswellbrook train leaves. One of the things that I really like where I'm driving at the moment is that we get a variety of scenery. There'll be some days where I drive down to the central coast of Gosford, which is about 90 minutes away, halfway to Sydney. There's other days where I go to Sydney. So this is an Endeavour train, which is an older diesel train from the early 90s. I drive these as well. So one day I'll be going to Sydney. The first Mariang train in passenger service is about to depart. Now it's funny, on the day I didn't hear all this clapping that was going on and the cheers coming from the other platform because I was concentrating on capturing the train. So there it goes. So on a different day, a Hunter diesel train closest to camera and a Mariang train. So this is a different platform now. This is platform 2, whereas platform 1 behind the trains is where I was on this particular occasion. So just to finish my scenery story, one day I could be going to Sydney, and then the other days I could be going to the Hunter Valley, out in the countryside, lots of different scenery, lots of farmland, some mining, and you really feel like you're in the country. So very, very different, very, very different driving styles, different types of trains, different passengers, and it's really good. I really enjoy it. But let's go back, now that you've seen all the different types of trains. And I can remember being 4 or 5 and living in a set of apartments next to the train line, and I would just stand on the balcony I would see the trains passing by, and I would sit on the balcony. Sorry, I would stand on the balcony, and I really needed to stand. I actually had a little step stool at one stage so I could see over the balcony, and I just, like, if I was on school holidays or whatever, I'd just happily watch the trains go by. I knew from about the age of 5 that I wanted to drive trains exactly like this that's on screen now, because these trains were running around when I was in school. And so I knew from the age of 5 I wanted to drive trains, and more specifically passenger trains. It took me, it was a few years, but not many, that I decided that I only wanted to drive these trains because I knew that passenger train drivers get to go home every night and sleep in their own beds, whereas especially freight train drivers, they don't. They have to sleep in hotels or other accommodation sometimes when they go away for a few days, and I didn't want to do that. And so from about the age of 9 or 10 all the way until I left high school when I was 18, my schools that I was in, you could see the train tracks from the front of the school. So often I'd be there, and I'd be watching the trains go past. On the weekends, I'd go and hang out at the local train stations. And the ironic thing was that I wasn't really allowed on a train by myself until I was 16, because my mum had a fear that I'd get assaulted. We were living in Western Sydney at the time, and she'd have a fear that I'd be assaulted, and that's exactly what happened. Unfortunately, I was assaulted, not badly, in the end, on my first train ride, and that was, needless to say, unfortunate. Oh, I just realised that YouTube wasn't giving me HD, whereas it is now. So from basically the age of 5, I wanted to know that I knew that I wanted to be a train driver. Now, going through school, I would learn more about the jobs, learn more about the job, learn more about the railways, that sort of thing. And then it was in year 10, so when I was about 15, year 10 was the first real opportunity that you'd have if you wanted to leave school at the end of that year with some sort of certificate to say that, you're okay to go out into the real world, sort of thing. Was sometimes the end of year 10 was sometimes the year that people left if they wanted to do an apprenticeship, or if they wanted to be a tradie, that sort of thing. They'd leave then. They'd leave at that stage. But we call it work experience, where you'd nominate a place that you wanted to work for a week to give you an idea of what the real working world was like. So in year 10 we could nominate a place. Now it would be really handy, of course, if you had a parent that worked in the job that you wanted to go into, well, obviously you could go with them, but that's not what happened for everybody. And I know that I wanted to get some experience on the trains. So I wrote that on my form you had to nominate some places or industries that you wanted to work in, not necessarily the places, but the industries you wanted to work in. So I wrote station assistant, as they were called then, / train driver. You'd put the form into the careers advisor, and the careers advisor would organise it. And then a few weeks before you're meant to go off, you'd get all the information, the employer would be notified, it'd all be covered under the education department, insurances, etc. But the aim of it was that you were mainly supposed to observe what was going on. So I did. And I was actually given a railway station near my house to go and... I'll just go have a drink. So it was a railway station near my house. So I did 5 morning shifts between 6am and 2pm. But I was able to get a little bit hands-on, mainly in terms of cleaning. They showed me what to do. I wasn't really supposed to interact with the passengers, but if someone asked me a question, I wasn't in uniform, but they'd seen me cleaning the station, so they'd ask questions, that sort of thing. It was really good because what happened was there was a train that would arrive at the station at about 9am, and it was only going 2 stations up the track, and then it would turn around and come back. So the station master at the time, he'd see the driver of the train and he'd say, "Hey mate, I've got this guy on work experience. He wants to be a train driver. Can you take him up to where you're going and drop him off back here?" And especially with what I know now, as actually being a driver, they were probably happy for the company. Because unless you've got somebody else riding with you as a trainee, or another driver going to work or going in between trains or whatever, a lot of the times you're by yourself. So they would be happy for they'd be happy for the experience, and for the other person to be with you. So every day it was a different driver every day. The station master would say, "Hey, can this guy go for a ride?" So yeah, and to me as a 15-year-old, it would be, I'd love the experience. And then I'd come back, have something to eat, and then I'd go and have to clean the toilets. But it was my good experience of being able to say, yeah, this is what I want to do. It was confirming from the inside, so to speak, rather than just sit here and watch the trains pass by, to see what it was actually like and to talk to these guys and to know that, these were people that, were the age of my parents and above. And, obviously you'd learn a lot more later about the job. So that was that week. Then what happened? Then what happened later on in that year, for some reason, you did a year of work experience in year 10. And then the next year, you did another week in year 11. And so the aim was probably to go somewhere different than what you did before. Whereas I'd be quite happy to go back to the station where I was before. So I basically wrote down the same thing as I wrote down the previous time. And that thing was to go work on the railways again. So I don't know how, but the careers advisor actually did something a lot better than he did before.
Platform 2 and 3, any customers for the next central service, please make your way to platform number 1. Your next central service is due to depart from platform number 1.
So it actually worked out. Pardon me, I'm having a sneezing fit here. But I'm cutting out the sneezes. He actually did one better. And what he did was he actually managed to arrange Sorry, I forgot to mute that one. What he'd actually arranged was for me to go into Sydney, and travel around with what the time were called loco inspectors. They're now called standards and compliance officers. And they were the people who supervised the competency and the operations of the drivers. And so I was able to ride along with them, sit in the office with them, because they'd also be responsible for if there were any train delays. They'd be the ones who would have to find out why the train was delayed. What did anything happen with the train? Did anything happen with the driver? That sort of thing. But also they'd ride around and do assessments on drivers, because we get assessed once a year. And so wherever they went, I was allowed to go. And so it was a massive thing for me. 2 years away from leaving school. 2 years from leaving school, knowing what I want to do, but maybe not being in a position to be able to do it. And so this is 100% what I want to do. But what I also had to think about is that, especially at the age that I would be when I was leaving school, you just don't walk into a train driver position. You've got to get there some other way. Now, in years past, especially like in the steam era, you got the job as a cleaner, and then you worked your way onto the train that way, and then you went on to freight trains, then you went on to passenger trains, then you went on to electric passenger trains, if that's what you wanted to do. Some people were quite happy to stay on freight their entire lives, and this is when it was all one organisation. There were freight trains, there were passenger trains, and there were electric trains. Whereas now, Transport themselves don't run freight trains. They're all private companies. So, and going the freight route was one of the big ways into becoming an electric train driver eventually. But as I mentioned before, I didn't want to necessarily drive freight trains and be away from home and that sort of thing. So the other way to do it was to work on the stations and then work your way up through the ranks that way. But at the time, they were bringing in electronic ticketing, and they were talking about reducing the number of people working on stations. So I'm thinking there's an avenue which might not be open to me, so I might have to explore some other alternatives. And some of my alternatives were journalism and public relations, but I didn't quite get the marks for that then. Oh, we're going to see two Mariung trains join together in a moment. But I didn't get the marks for that, so after spending the summer holidays while I was waiting for my high school results, I worked at an amusement centre with, where they had pinball machines, video games, that sort of thing. We're talking 1992 here, 1992, 93. So I thought, okay, what am I going to do? What I decided to do after talking to my mum about it, I thought, well, computers are going to be big. And my high school education in terms of computers wasn't that great. So we're just going to watch the two trains join up. A lot of it's done electronically these days, so just drive one train, connect with the coupler on the other side, and it just joins together. Just like that. Job done. So okay, that shouldn't be happening. There we go. So in 1993, I spent 12 months in basically college learning computers, administration skills, that sort of thing. I'm not in the rail corridor here, I'm behind a fence, but I got the phone in a gap. Oh, the caption says exactly that. Oh, we've got to the end of that episode and I haven't finished my story. Oh, this is more of a recent one. And so it'll show you the different introduction that I've done. So this one actually works out well because it's the next station down the line at Hamilton. So we'll see all of the same sort of trains but from different points of view. Hamilton with a pub on either side of the line. And a level crossing. Apologies in advance for the bells, but they are a necessary evil. It's a very busy level crossing. This is the Beaumont Street level crossing at Hamilton. It's actually a bit of a danger spot because of pedestrians and also vehicles. And so we were talking about Hamilton Yard before. Oh, that's Hamilton Yard to the left-hand side. Off in the far distance is actually Newcastle. So I went to college for 12 months learning computers. It was basically where I was introduced to Windows, Microsoft Word and all of that sort of stuff, the Microsoft family. And then because I thought that I needed a plan B because a lot of people weren't being hired to work on stations. So in early 1994, I went off into the job market and I was trying to get different jobs. Administration and secretarial and reception type work, but I was going up against a lot of ladies in the same sort of thing, and especially for reception type jobs, they'd have some advantages that I wouldn't have, and especially if they were experienced. So I wasn't getting anywhere. And then one day I was at what we used to call the CES, the Commonwealth Employment Service, where you'd go down and you'd have job listings. You'd also have listings in the newspaper. But if there was a job that you were interested in, you went and spoke to a careers advisor. They'd give you more information about it. They'd possibly organise to speak to the company and apply for the job. So there was one job that I saw that I thought, well, there's a lot of women and a lot of ladies that won't go for working for a construction company back then that was storeman / admin person. So I thought, I'll go for that. So I went for that and I was successful. Now, around about the same time, surprisingly, I was looking at the boards one day and there was a job for temporary station assistant. So here I am. This is an industry that I actually want to work in, compared to construction industry where I didn't really want to work in. Not mechanically minded, not construction minded. So I went through the process and I was actually offered both jobs at the same time. No need for a spoiler alert. You know which one I chose. So I head down to my first station, Circular Quay. Supposed to work there for 6 months. Working between 6 PM and 10 PM, cleaning the station. Temporary for 12 months. Sorry, temporary for 6 months. Temporary for 6 months. So I thought, yes, this is my foot in the door. Anything could happen from here. And if not, I've still got 6 months of experience. Because what they discovered by that stage is that it's a lot easier to get rid of someone if they didn't work out after 6 months rather than a job for life. So it wasn't even a month in, so they said to me, would you like to go to a different station to Town Hall and be temporary there for 12 months? I'd be working 8 hours a day instead of 4. I'd have the ability to work weekends, which is more money. So, yes, please sign me up. Now, Town Hall was at the time, and still is, one of the busiest stations in Sydney. There's lots of cleaning, but also I was involved with the running of trains for the first time working on the platform. So I thought, oh, this is great. You know, I could work, and not everybody wants to work on a platform. You know, telling people where the trains are going by the passenger information system, making PA announcements, that sort of stuff. Not everybody wants to do that. Watching what they call these days the platform train interface. Not everybody wants to do that. And I would actually be able to do that better than people who had been 20 years because they were quite happy to be cleaning. So I'd be quite happy cleaning at that stage. Now that didn't really. Might have to adjust the volume here. Yeah, I'll adjust the volume there. But it also turns down the train volume. That's all right. So I was quite happy doing that. I was there for 18 months. Was made a permanent member of staff by that stage so I could apply for other jobs. And then I thought, let's start climbing the ladder. Now, it was not easy to get from station staff straight into train crew at that stage. You also had to wait for the schools to be advertised, for the positions to be advertised, to go in to learn how to be a guard. Some people would call them conductors in some areas. So I went into what they call revenue protection, which is all about making sure that people have got tickets, etc. So I did that for 3 to 4 years. Was a team leader. Was a team leader in the end. The train is coming, trust me. Became a team leader. And then I worked in the security control centre for 3 years. And that also included the Sydney Olympics. Which was good. Now it was interesting working there over the Sydney Olympic period, was because obviously the eyes of the world are on you. More potential for security incidents, terrorism, crowd control incidents, that sort of thing. And just the sheer weight of numbers of people using the network. You know, lots of people from overseas, not familiar with the system. There were lots more people hired, lots more services. Trains ran for 24 hours a day. But we also had a lot more resources that we normally wouldn't have. And that would include things like extra staff on standby, extra management, that sort of thing. And overall, because there were so many people and they were all happy to be there, there weren't any really serious incidents. And it worked out And it worked out really well in the end. So it was a great period. It was a great period to be working there. Then by that stage, I thought, you know what? This is all great. Oi, stop blocking the level crossing. You in the white car. I thought, well, this is a great time to actually start to work on becoming a driver. Now, at the time, the usual internal route was to go work as a train guard first. So you'd be on the train, you'd be the one opening and closing the doors, looking after the passengers, and helping the driver with any mechanical things, and doing other safety jobs that the driver couldn't do. So I'm thinking it's a great way forward. So I did that for 4 years, and then I finally applied. I thought the time's right. I was actually working. There's two different types of guards and drivers. There's the suburban guard or driver, and then there's the inner city guard or driver. We're only watching inner city trains here, longer distances, etc. But I was based in Sydney, and I was regularly coming up to Newcastle, Central Coast, the Blue Mountains, very, very occasionally the South Coast. But I thought the best way to become a driver is to actually go into driver's school. You start as a suburban driver, and then later on you go into inner city if you want to. So I did that. I went to the school, and because I was a guard, at the time it was only 6 months, a training school for 6 months. And when you go into the training school, from day one, you've got a trainer next to you. You learn all about the trades. You learn all about the network, that sort of thing. And then in 6 months, the period now is more 12 to 18 months, depending on your progress, but it's usually a minimum of 12 these days to become a driver. But you also have to get a lot more hours up. And so I became a fully qualified driver in 2005, which is 20 years ago. So 2005, I became qualified. Now, I stayed in Sydney and I worked on suburban trains until 2019. So that's a lot of time driving. That's a lot of time driving around Sydney, within about an hour's radius of Sydney. And it was good, but I'd missed working on the inner city network. I'd really missed that. So what I decided to do was apply for a transfer to the inner city depot at Central. So that would mean that instead of going to the training college, I would be going out with the driver trainers at the depot and learning the trades and learning the tracks that I didn't know how to drive on before. So instead of just driving within an hour's radius of Sydney, I was now driving within a 3-hour radius of Sydney. And I'd be regularly driving to Newcastle, I'd regularly be driving to Newcastle, to the Blue Mountains, to the South Coast. And then I had all the health situations with my mum. And I've always liked the Newcastle area anyway. I'd always liked the Newcastle area anyway. It was always a thing that I'd wanted to do for ages, to live in Newcastle, which I do now. So I applied for a transfer in 2020, and then it was actually in the middle of COVID in 2020 that I received the information that I was going to Newcastle. And then the process again was to learn how to drive these trains, for instance, and to drive on lines that I hadn't driven on before. So I was driving now from between Newcastle and Sydney, and also within a couple of hours radius of Newcastle up to Dungog and the Hunter Valley. So it's a period of learning. Okay, we'll watch this one. We'll watch this one as well, just to finish off the story. Now, the funny thing about this theme music is that I've recently started using it on a mountain of work. At the start of the episode on the Good Morning Newcastle interchange, the music was different. So we're at Taralma, which is on the Newcastle Central Coastline. It's about 15 minutes south of Newcastle. It's an unattended platform. But the music was different for this episode compared to the Good Morning Newcastle at the start of the episode. And that's because I was using music that was contained within the app that I use to edit the episodes on my mobile phone. So for ages I was allowed to do that, and then all of a sudden I started getting these copyright warnings from YouTube. So the music that I use now comes from the YouTube music library, so I'm able to use it. Oh, we've got a freight train coming. Ah, this is a coal train. So coming to Newcastle and getting qualified in everywhere that Newcastle runs. Took me a couple of months. Now, the electric side of things, I didn't have to worry about getting trained in because I was already qualified. I already knew how to drive the VSET and the Oscar trains, and I already knew how to drive between Sydney and Newcastle. So I didn't have to worry about that. All I had to do, but that was still a good couple of months of work, was to learn how to drive the diesel trains and where the diesel trains ran. So that was a good couple of months. But in a couple of months' time, while I'm on holidays, I'll be racking up my 5 years of service at Newcastle, which is great. One of the reasons that I came to inner city when I did was that I wanted to drive these new Marion trains, and that's what I'm doing now. So, on the electric side of things between Newcastle, Gosford and Sydney, this is all I'll be driving now. And it's never a thing that I've done before in terms of only being qualified on one type of train. Now, this is a good example, actually, of the selective door opening on these new trains. The train's longer than the platform, so only the doors at the platform open and the rest don't open. Because there are many, many platforms on this line where they've got shorter platforms. This one is 6 carriages long. Where we've got others that are 1 platform long. It's because in some of the areas there's not a lot of space for a super long platform, and they're not busy stations. So, with the exception of the 2 different types of diesel trains, so now I'll be driving 1 type of electric train and 2 types of diesel trains, compared to 5 when I was driving VSETs and also Oscars. Now, this is an XPT. This is a regional train, express passenger train based on the high-speed train or HST from England. They're due to be replaced. Now, not every train stops here at Teralba. It's one of the smaller stations on the line. So, not every... Oh, that's a great moving cross. So, some days I stop there, some days I don't. On some rosters that I have, sometimes you stop there going to Sydney and don't stop there coming from Sydney, or vice versa. And this is the various car markers that tell me where to stop depending on what sort of train I'm driving, because they're different sizes and different lengths. Now, this is another coal train, but a different one than the one we saw earlier. Now, can you imagine living at that house behind the train? Now, some people would hate it, but you do get used to it. Or many people get used to it. I shouldn't say everybody gets used to it. There's always lots of pubs around. Not every station, but there are pubs around many stations. This is one of the several stations around that don't have step-free easy access. It's what they've tried to do is do the bigger stations first. Now this is a 10 carriage train. So if we were at the front of the train, we'd see some of the carriages off the platform, but those doors won't open. This is the first type of train that we've had that actually does that. Very common overseas. These trains were made in South Korea. Whereas every other train that we've seen on this, every other passenger train we've seen on this video, it's been made in Australia. But eventually, it is going to be good to just have one different type of train that I drive on the electric side. Because you can imagine driving 3 different types of trains from 3 different eras. The VSETs dating from the 70s and 80s, Oscars from 2007, and Mariang's introduced into service in 2024. 3 very different types of trains. Now, it seems a long time ago, and it is a long time ago, but electric trains only arrived in Newcastle in 1984. Now, this video was recorded a few weeks ago, so it's more winter time now than the start of the episode, where it came from, where it was in summertime. Still a great looking day in Terralba. It's only a few 100 metres from Lake Macquarie. And even though I only shot this footage a few weeks ago, that site is now history. Am I loving the job still? Yeah, absolutely loving the job. And I'm very my personality type is very uncommon, actually. When it comes to people who drive trains, in my experience, there's a lot of people who just do it for the coin, whereas I do it because I love trains. And I could say, well, I know it's not me actually driving this train at the moment because I'm recording it, but, this is what I do. And it's cool to be able to say, yeah, this is what I do. And we can see down there with the open... Oh, this is a good example of the train being too long for the platform again, and how the doors don't open when there's no platform. This is the first type of train that we've had that just doesn't automatically open everything. So the guard that we saw back there's a job that I used to do, and they open and close all the doors. I tell the driver when it's safe to go. So this video, I hope, has given you a bit more of an insight into what I do and why I like to do it. There's been some hard times. Absolutely, there's been hard times, just like in any job. The shift work's not easy to get used to. And I'm actually finding, very strangely, when I started driving... Oh, here's another coal train. Now, it's a different company's coal train to what we saw earlier. When I started driving trains 20 years ago, I really loved to be on afternoon shifts. So I'd wake up about lunchtime at the absolute earliest. I'd go do work, come home, stay up for a bit and go to bed. But then again, I also had to drive to work, so I wasn't a fan of getting up early. Whereas now, working early morning suits me because of hockey that I do outside of work, which is all in the afternoon. So I can work on a Saturday, go and have a nap, and then do hockey in the afternoon. Now, this Oscar train's also going to be too long for the platform. They've got a different type of selective door opening, which is controlled by the guard. So it's not an automatic system that happens in the Mariung. And so we'll see that in a moment when I change the point of view. So those doors that haven't opened have been selected by the guard. Whereas with the Mariung train, the train is it's automatically detected. So the door that's never opened closest to camera, on a Mariung train, that door would actually be open because it would detect that the platform's there. So we are filming into the sun slightly here. So I thought this video would be something that I would have never have done in the Erk Pod days because I was an audio guy. Oh, I've got another express VSET train coming. So yeah, I would never have thought of doing this video, apart from the fact that I didn't do video in the old Erk Pod days. But it's certainly not something I'm going to do on every episode. But we've got a regional explorer type train coming. Now this is the regional version of the Endeavour train that we saw earlier. But I hope that you have enjoyed this video. Certainly something very different and something that I'm proud to bring to you to show, hey, this is what I do. These are the type of trains that I drive. So if anyone ever says, hey, what sort of trains do you drive? Well, show you this episode of Erk Pod and you'll see exactly why. So I'm out to work. There'll be links to these episodes in the show description. It's Ralba Fire Station just across the road. And on the next episode, we're actually going to bring you some more gaming. We're going to roleplay being a paramedic. So I hope you have enjoyed the episode. I have been Eric Brook. Thank you very much for watching. As I bring you story time, all stations to Newcastle. We won't be doing that. Oh, that's what I need to do. There we go. So another episode of Erk Pod is in the can. Hope you have enjoyed. Thank you very much for watching. I know that they just scream cut here, but I've got an oversized prop, so why not? And cut. Bye-bye for now. Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you next time.